We should be good. Alrighty. Well, good evening, everybody, and welcome in. I'm gonna make my way slowly all the way up here. Good evening. I apologize if my Zoom friends can't hear me. I will fix it in a second, but I'm assuming this time I think I've turned everything on right. Everything should be working. I did my mic check. There's just no one back there right now to look, but don't worry, I've got you. If you can't hear me, I'll be back there in a second. For everyone who's in person, welcome into another program with the Schaumburg Library. I'm so happy to have you guys here, as well as our guest speaker, who you've been here before, right?
I don't believe so.
Never mind, Dolly's never been here before. So I'm so excited that I get to be your first time programs coordinator here. Welcome on in, friend. Grab some handouts there in the back. For you at home, handouts will be emailed to you after the program. But welcome in, I'm Chris. I'm your adult programs coordinator here at the Schaumburg Library. And before I hand things over to the speaker, I just want to go over some of our friendly reminders for our in-person and our Zoom audience. For our Zoom audience, closed captions are enabled. You can turn those on or off as you'd like using the Zoom toolbar. If you have any questions for this evening's presenter, please feel free to use the Q&A option to submit those. We'll tackle all questions at the end of the program. And for our in-person audience, if you have questions, please save those for the end of the program. Throw your hand high in the air. I have to come over to you with my special little mic here and hold it under your mouth so our Zoom audience can hear what you're asking this evening's presenter. And then also for our in-person audience, that's a perfect reminder, if you could silence all cell phones and any other electronic device that may make noise during the presentation. Sounds and lights emitted by those devices are distracting to your fellow patrons and of course the presenter. Without further ado, I would like to introduce Dolly Foster, who has been a horticulturalist for about 24 years, specializing in pollinators at this point, kind of as a whole. Dolly is also a board member of the, I want to make sure I say this right, Schaumburg Monarch Institute, which is a 501c3 that specializes in promoting the planting of milkweed to help, if you'll excuse this really bad pun, fostering the growth of monarch butterflies. So everyone, please give a big warm welcome to Dolly.
Thank you. That was a very good introduction. I like that. I'm glad it was recorded. We just have to wait a second for my computer to copy this file. Of course, I didn't do it ahead of time, so I apologize. So, some other things about myself while we're just waiting for this file to start. The Schaumburg Monarch Initiative has been around for about 5 or 6 years. I've been on the board now for about 1.5 years, and we do a lot of small events around the area, soon to be bigger events in the next couple of years. But our main goal is to get more milkweed into people's yards, and we do give away milkweed at certain events, so keep an eye out for that. We don't have a Facebook page yet. We have a Facebook page, but we haven't been able to get into it yet. But once we do, we will be able to communicate more with the public. We do have a website, though, and that I believe is the Schaumburg Monarch Initiative, or the SMI. Come on. And how did I get on it when I live in Indiana? I don't know.
You used to live here?
No, I grew up in Hammond, and I still live in Hammond, and worked in Illinois for about 18 years at 2 different park districts, and then retired. And now I'm a consultant, and I have a micro nursery on my, there we go, that's what I was waiting for, on my driveway. So I sell about 5,000 plants a year off of my driveway. Yeah, it's fun. I get to meet a lot of really nice people who love butterflies and bees just as much as I do. So that's always a nice thing. Okay, we are, I think, gonna be okay. I think somehow the file got corrupted. I'm going to address that in my talk, but yeah, it's been a bust of a year. Okay. So,
I see some, but not the orange and black that you Yeah, the Monarch.
That's true. I haven't seen near as many as usual.
There we go.
Them.
All right, Adobe Acrobat. I don't need all that stuff. Okay. All right, so what we're going to talk about tonight is monarch butterflies, and I started getting interested in monarch butterflies when, I've always loved butterflies when I was a kid, and I loved plants when I was a kid, and I especially loved wildflowers when I was a kid. And I didn't even realize what they were or what any of it was or what the connections were, but I just knew that I kind of loved this stuff. So when I changed careers when I was 29, I decided to go into horticulture because I just love plants so much. I wasn't even a gardener at that point. So I kind of started gardening when I became a master gardener and a horticulturist, and decided at the very, very beginning that my focus was going to be butterflies. So my garden was going to be a butterfly garden, and I was coached by a really good master gardener on how to build a butterfly garden. However, I didn't see any butterflies in my garden for the first few years, and I had no caterpillars because I was using old garden books before people really discovered and realized the connection between native plants and native insects. And so I didn't have any of the right plants in my garden. I had to rip out my first butterfly garden, which is now a patio, because I had all the wrong plants. So that was when I started to do a little bit more research, and I was introduced to a group called Wild Ones. Wild Ones is a native plant group. There's chapters all over the place. West Cook is the chapter out here by you guys. And West Cook is a really fantastic group to be part of. I'm at Gibson Woods in Hammond. That's our chapter name. And we were the first chapter in Indiana, and now there's 3. So just in the last year, we were the only Wild Ones chapter for 20 years. And now just in the past year, we have added 2 more chapters. So it's kind of nice. It's growing in Indiana. When I started to go to Wild Ones lectures and Wild Ones meetings and things like that, I started to get the connection that you have to, if you want the native insects, you have to have the native plants that they need. And so I started planting in my garden, and now after about 22 years of planting native plants in my garden, I have I'd say about 70% natives, 30% non-natives, and every year I'm taking away a little bit more of the non-natives, but there's still a few things that I'm sentimental about. It's important to have native plants, but your native plants, you don't have to have 100% native plants in your garden. If there is something that you like that's non-native, go ahead and keep it or plant it. Just make sure that that is not a plant that is going to spread and become invasive. That's really important. So you can have them, just make sure it's not invasive. Like if you really, really love tall grasses, I don't think that you should ever put Phragmites australis in your backyard because you're going to farm it for the rest of your life. And you'll be destroying the environment to boot. So, so let's talk a little bit about butterflies in general. Butterflies are truly amazing creatures. They're very beautiful. I love watching my butterflies in my garden because it's very relaxing to watch them just kind of flit around and soar back and forth. If you're watching a monarch butterfly or a big tiger swallowtail, they kind of fly like a bird, so they're kind of back and forth, and the viceroys kind of fly like they're drunk and they fly crazy, and the red admirals and painted ladies are the same way. They don't fly like a bird at all. They fly very erratically. So it's kind of fun to watch them. And butterflies have some really interesting aspects about their body that are different from mammal bodies like ours. They're butterflies, monarch butterflies in particular, they can smell milkweed a mile away, and they smell it with their antennae, so they don't have a nose. They will be able to feel that they are on milkweed if they tap their feet on it. So sometimes you'll see a female butterfly on a milkweed plant. She's kind of marching her feet. And you're like, why is she just standing there marching her feet? She's not eating and she's not laying an egg. That monarch butterfly is making sure that she is on milkweed and that it's healthy milkweed, and so that she can lay an egg. So that's how they can do that. So they taste with their feet, they smell with their antennae, they sip when they are the adult butterfly with a proboscis, which is like a straw. And that straw winds up, it curls up under what we would perceive as their nose. They don't really have a nose like we think of it, but it's curled up so it's protected right under their eyes. The butterfly's wings are covered with soft scales. So if you ever touch a butterfly and a little bit of material comes off on your fingers, that's not dust. Those are thousands and thousands of scales that give the wings their color, their structure, and their integrity to fly. And then butterflies will lay eggs, monarch butterflies lay eggs only on milkweed. So that makes them a specialist butterfly. There's only one genus of plants that they will lay their eggs on, that is milkweed, but there are many different species of milkweed. There's about 110 species in North America. In Illinois and Indiana, where I have been growing for the past 24 years, there's about 22 species of milkweed. And then there's about 12 that can grow that they lay eggs on. And then out of that 12 species that they lay eggs on, there's about 4 or 5 that are good that you can plant in your home garden. So we'll be going over milkweed a little later. So how can we help butterflies now? It's really important to remember that the reason why butterflies are in the predicament that they're in, the monarchs and all other butterflies, is because of humans. It's really not anything that we can ignore anymore. So we have to think about what we can do right now to help them. And that is going to be a pretty quick list. And I just want to make sure I get my list right. So I'm going to open this up. So monarch butterflies have been in decline for many decades. They think that their numbers have gone down about 90%. And that's true. And their overwintering numbers from this year have gone down even further. I'll show you the chart a little later. But there's things that we can do in our community to help monarchs. Things like what the Schaumburg Community Garden Club are doing, selling native plants. Things like the Schaumburg Monarch Initiative is doing, is giving away milkweed and educating and sharing butterflies at certain events. If you've ever gone to Spring Valley Nature Center and seen the people, the volunteers releasing butterflies during the day, those are our volunteers. And those volunteers are trained in how to raise the butterflies. They raise them right there at Spring Valley. They release them right there at Spring Valley. And that's an education tool to draw in children and teenagers and adults and teach them about monarchs and why they're important. But other things that you can do in your community, number one is going to be to plant milkweed. If you don't have milkweed in your garden yet, then this might be the year to get it into your garden. There is more to milkweed than just the big fat leaf common milkweed, which is kind of spready. I'm not going to call it invasive because it's a native plant. We don't call native plants invasive. But milkweed gets around. It moves around your garden quite a bit when you have it in there for a few years. So there's other species of milkweed I'm going to show you tonight. So planting milkweed is increasingly important, but building habitat beyond the milkweed is even more important. So that means having the nectar plants that monarch butterflies and other butterflies like. That means having different aspects of your yard configured in a way that is going to be butterfly friendly. We're going to talk about a big long list of those tonight. And then create a milkweed garden or a monarch butterfly garden somewhere in your community, at a school. Ask your church if you can do it. Local community gardens, need pollinator gardens, things like that. So start a garden somewhere in your community and then talk about it. Tell people about it. Have the kids out to the garden. Have the ladies in the church out to the garden, bring the women's clubs out to the garden, talk about it, talk about its importance, give away milkweed if you can, give away seeds if you can, but really start to spread the word and become like an evangelist of the monarch. And then if you can, raise a few monarch butterflies every year. You don't need to raise a lot. If you have kids or grandkids, it's kind of fun just to raise a few. I would say don't bring in more than 5 caterpillars or eggs at a time to raise, because that seems to be like a nice low number that people can handle for raising. And that is going to give you a good opportunity to see the whole life cycle and see the metamorphosis. And that is extremely emotionally impactful on you as a human being, to see a small creature like a monarch butterfly go through its life cycle. So let's go over the life cycle right now. We can get a little taste of it tonight. I didn't have any caterpillars at home to bring tonight. I certainly didn't have any butterflies, so I apologize for that, but it's been kind of a bust of a year. I was saying earlier, I'm going to talk about that in a minute though. So the monarch life cycle, can you see my arrow? Oh, good. Okay, so the life cycle starts up here as the eggs. So this is a US penny. This is a D on the penny right here, which says that that penny was minted in Denver. And that is the egg right next to it. So they are very, very small. They are about the size of the top of a pin. This is an egg that has been freshly laid. And this is an egg that is about to hatch. Okay, so a caterpillar hatches from an egg, but a monarch butterfly does not hatch out of its chrysalis, it ecloses. I'm going to remind you about that in a minute. So when you see this black shadow at the top of the egg, that means that that caterpillar is going to come out within, minutes to a few hours. And the first time I ever saw that, oh my goodness, I was just perplexed. I didn't know what I did wrong. I thought, oh my God, I have killed my caterpillar. Did I poison it with something? I put just fresh water in there with it on the paper towel, like everything's, I was like, I looked at all my directions that I was going by. Oh my gosh, I did not understand what I did wrong. Turns out I did nothing wrong. I did absolutely nothing wrong. Within about a day, the little caterpillars, they usually look kind of like a creamy white color, and they're about as thick as a thread when they come out of the egg. Within about a day, their head darkens up. They have a little black dot. That's the mask on their face mask on their head, and they start getting stripes. This is one piece of long grain white rice next to these little caterpillars. So they are very, very tiny when they're even just a day old. For the next 14 to 17 days, these little caterpillars are going to eat milkweed and grow. And as they grow, they will molt their skin 4 times.
Keep going, you're good.
Did I turn off?
Nope.
Okay.
Someone just wants me to do one small thing.
Okay. There we go. Okay. All right. So for 14 to 17 days, the caterpillars are going to eat. And once they eat to a certain point, their skin can't expand anymore. It can't stretch anymore. And so they have to molt that skin off. So they do that 4 times. And then when they get to that last stage, when they get ready to molt their skin the last time, they'll be right here in this spot. They will have been hanging here for about 2 days. We call it the J stage. They curl up just like the letter J. They molt their skin the last time, and when they do that, they reveal their chrysalis. So a butterfly does not spin a cocoon, it doesn't spin a chrysalis, it reveals the chrysalis in the. For 14 to 17 days, they are in the chrysalis stage. This next photo is a freshly made chrysalis. You can see the little gold dots. For a long, long time, nobody knew what those little gold dots were on the monarch chrysalis, but it's partly camouflage and partly air exchange. They're sphericals. But this one is about to hatch. This is a really, really old picture. This is probably from one of the first couple of years that I raised monarchs. You can see just barely that you can see the wing right through the chrysalis here. Do you see that? Do you see the orange and black? So what happens is the night before or the day before the chrysalis is going to open, the whole thing turns clear and you can see the butterfly through the chrysalis skin. And then right before it opens, it turns kind of cloudy because what the butterfly has done is let extra air in and has wiggled around a little bit, gotten an air pocket in between the body of the butterfly and the chrysalis skin, and it opens up at that point. When the monarch comes out, it's coming out upside down, so it has to turn around and make sure it can secure itself somewhere so it can hang straight and the wings are not obstructed, because if the wings are obstructed at all while their wings are drying within the first, I'd say about 45 minutes or so to an hour, those wings are always going to be bent. So if they're in some kind of container that is too shallow, or if they're stuck somewhere in between 2 things out in the garden, and their wing is bent when it's being formed and dries, then that's it. that wing is cooked. It's there for like that forever. When they come out of the chrysalis, though, their abdomen is going to be really big and fat. That butterfly is going to look like it's pregnant. And you can just see just a hair of that here. What the butterfly has to do is pump all of that fluid in their abdomen down into the wing veins. And that is what expands the wings, and then the wings dry over the course of a few hours. And then they can fly after about 4 or 5 hours. In this photo, we have 2 female butterflies. The male butterflies usually have a little black dot right here where my cursor is. And I think I have a picture of a male butterfly in here a little bit later on, but these 2 are females. So when you go out and you're looking for eggs, if you do decide that you want to raise a couple of monarchs, it's really important to realize that you're also going to encounter a few things on the milkweed plant. You're going to see eggs. The egg is a really beautiful little butter yellow when it's first laid, and then it turns white as it hardens. And then you need to make sure that you realize that it has a point on it and it has ridges down the side, because oftentimes you'll see these little white dots all over the bottom of a milkweed leaf, and these are just little sap balls. These are little balls of the milkweed sap from inside the leaf that an insect has come by and punctured the leaf, and it has leaked out a little bit of the sap to stop up that leak, and it hardens. And it looks about the same size as an egg. So it can be very confusing. And then if you grow milkweed, you will be growing aphids. And that's just a fact of life. I remember the first time my husband went out golfing after I told him about this whole thing with the milkweed and the eggs and all that. He said, "Oh, I found milkweed leaves and I found all kinds of eggs on them and I'll bring them home." And he brought me home these leaves, and these leaves were completely bare. There was nothing on the leaves. And it was because there were aphids all over the leaves at the golf course, and they were all little green aphids. And by the time he got home, the aphids had crawled off and he had no egg. And it took him 10 years more to actually find an egg. He hasn't had a good track record. He doesn't come and help me out very much though. So he doesn't practice a lot. So if you are a freshly hatched caterpillar, like this little guy in the center, here's our egg. Here's our first instar. It will take you 2 weeks to get all the way through to the 5th instar, right before the last molt. And when you do that as a caterpillar, you grow 1,000 times your size and weight. Now, if a human did that, it would be the equivalent of a human baby growing to the size of a school bus in 2 weeks. And that's not a diaper I'd want to change. So there's a really nice lady on Facebook who makes these fantastic infograms. So you're going to see a few of them tonight from a few different sources. But she makes fantastic ones. So here's a beautiful picture of a monarch who has just come out of her chrysalis. Actually, it's a boy. You can see that this vein is swollen right here. It doesn't exactly look like a dot, but it's swollen. This is a pheromone gland that the male butterflies get. But you can see the abdomen is really, really fat. Like that butterfly looks like it's pregnant. But of course, it's just the fluid that's going to get pumped into the wings and to stretch the wings out. So you can see how little the wings are when they come out of the chrysalis. They're very, very compact in there. So when a butterfly emerges from the chrysalis, the term is to eclose, not to hatch. It's eclose. And what's the difference between a monarch butterfly and a viceroy? So here's a really beautiful photo of a male monarch butterfly. You notice that it's got the dots on the back. The females will have no dots. But if we look down here on this viceroy, the dots up at the tops of the wings are really similar. The coloring is really similar all the way through the butterfly. But the viceroy butterfly has a line down here on the hind wings, and that smile is Mother Nature laughing all the way to the bank. Because what this is biologic mimicry. So the viceroy evolved at the same time and in the same area as the monarch butterfly. The monarch butterfly eats milkweed. The monarch butterfly is poisonous to animals and birds. And the viceroy butterfly evolved in the same area, but does not eat milkweed as a caterpillar. So they're not poisonous, but all of the birds and all the little mammals that would normally eat a butterfly think that the viceroy is poisonous, and so they don't get eaten. So that is what mimicry does. And you can see here, this is the viceroy caterpillar, kind of looks like bird poop. This is a nice little evolutionary tool to conceal that caterpillar all the way through its 5 instars. And then down here we have our monarch caterpillar hiding in those milkweed blossoms and trying to camouflage itself that way. The annual life cycle of a monarch butterfly is really different than a lot of other butterflies. It is by no means the only butterfly that will migrate. There's about 7 other species of butterfly that migrate in the US, but they don't migrate in as big numbers as the monarch butterfly. That's why the monarch butterfly is so noticeable, because they usually have such big numbers, but they're down now this year. If we start now in August, the monarch butterfly is starting to slow down on the breeding. The breeding usually goes for a few months here in Chicagoland area. So in August, the breeding is starting to slow down. Like right around this time, it kind of ramps up a little bit because the butterflies are laying the eggs for the migration generation. So they'll be born within the next month, and they will be the butterflies that migrate. The butterflies that are flying around right now that are laying eggs are not the butterflies that will be flying to Mexico for the migration. It will be their progeny that are going to hatch between now and the end of September and into the first week of October. So after those butterflies of the migration generation eclose from their chrysalids, then they are going to start flying south. And what they do to know where that they are going is a big mystery, but they think it has something to do with the magnetics of the mountain range that they go to in Mexico, which is the Sierra Madres Mountains. They are a magnetic mountain range. They are ferrous, so there's a lot of iron in them. And they think that the butterflies have some kind of compass in their brains that helps them direct where they're going to go. They also follow the blooming of goldenrod and asters from Canada. They follow the blooming of the goldenrod and the asters all the way down through to Texas. And so that will show them how to go, the direction of the angle of the sun, and the overnight temperatures are going to also be cues to tell them that it's time for them to migrate. So right now, August 16th, the butterflies up in Canada have already started leaving. So we may see more butterflies coming through in the next couple of weeks because of that. And then when they do land in Mexico, in central Mexico, in Michoacan, at the end of October is during the Day of the Dead ceremonies and the Day of the Dead celebrations in Mexico, which is sort of our equivalent of Halloween, but it's not really Halloween. It's more of a religious, indigenous religious ceremony and celebration of ancestral spirits coming back to visit. And so that's what the indigenous people of central Mexico thought the butterflies were. They thought they were the spirits of their departed loved ones coming back to visit them, and then they would stay all winter in that area, and then they would leave again in the spring. But Day of the Dead ceremony and celebration is absolutely beautiful. I really love the whole aesthetic of it. It's really pretty. It's very, very heartfelt when you think about it. And a lot of people do feel that butterflies are very spiritual, and they are the spirits of their relatives coming to visit them. And I think that idea of Day of the Dead has really spread all around the world. So butterflies are very meaningful in a lot of cultures. So once the butterflies get down there to Mexico, they just kind of hang out. They hang out between October and the last part of February. Somewhere around Valentine's Day, the butterflies are going to start waking up. They cluster in these huge clusters of butterflies in the trees. And I will show you a couple pictures of that in a minute. And the clusters start to break up in February, and then the butterflies start to go down to go up to Texas. They start to mate in Texas. They lay eggs in Texas. The eggs laid in Texas are the Generation 1 butterflies. Okay. By the time the butterflies get through to just about the end of Generation 2, that is when they reach us in Chicago, and that is usually at the end of May. This year, however, the monarch butterflies left Mexico by March 1st. March 1st, the mountain was empty. They couldn't believe it. They couldn't believe that they had left a month early. And they got to us here in Chicagoland a month early. The first one I saw was on May 2nd. And she laid a couple eggs in my garden, and then she zipped off, and the eggs were sterile. She hadn't even mated, I don't think. And then the butterflies just kind of disappeared for about 3 weeks until the eggs that were laid here eclosed out of their chrysalis. So that was a really strange spring. So it was a really strange start to spring. It was a very strange start to our Monarch calendar this year up here in this area. And so it's been very sparse because what I think happened was that the butterflies just kept going. The wind was just in the right direction, the weather was just in the right direction, and they just kept going north. It was warm up north, so that's where they went. And then they never, like the ones that stayed here for the summer, never really built the population like they usually do. The whole reason why the monarch butterfly comes to us in this region, the Corn Belt, is because this is the breeding. This is the ancestral breeding areas of this butterfly, because this used to all be short and tall grass prairie, and this is where the milkweed lived. And so that's why they would come up from Mexico, because it was too hot in Mexico over the summer to breed. Okay, so what we have done is we turned almost all of the Midwest into a corn belt, and the corn belt has almost systematically destroyed all of the milkweed that would normally be growing here. So that's one thing that really has hurt the butterflies in the last, probably 70 to 80 years. So that's a big problem. Moving on though to the migration, we can see here that when the butterflies, if we're thinking about the migration right now, the butterflies are coming down in these yellow stripes. And they are coming down from Canada, and they're coming from the East Coast, and they're going to come down into this funnel and funnel down one way into Mexico, into central Mexico, where they will overwinter. So, all righty. So let's show you a little visit. Those of you on Zoom, you may not be able to see this video very well, but we're going to try it. Oh, it won't let me.
Oh, here. I will just come and undo what I did.
Okay. Maybe it's a PDF though, so I'm not sure if it'll do it.
Oh, it might not because it's a PDF.
Yeah.
Is this the video? This
Yeah,
side?
that side. So it might not. Nope.
Oh, it's being done.
Bummer. So you can see in this photo though, at least, go ahead.
Do you want me to go back?
Yeah, go ahead and back. You can see in this photo that all of the little bits of orange and all the clusters that are shadowed all over these trees, these are all monarch butterflies. And if we were able to watch the video, I apologize, we can't watch the video, but if we were able to watch the video, it would just be butterflies kind of hanging out in the trees and flittering off the trees. And when the clusters get hit with the sunlight and then the clusters break up, it's really beautiful. I was able to go down and see the butterflies in Mexico in 2019, which was the highest record of population within like the last 20 years. So it was a really lucky year to go. Very, very lucky year. So this is what it looks like when they're hanging out in Mexico. They don't eat. They don't really nectar off of flowers very much when they're down there. They just basically hang out in the trees about 5 butterflies deep. And this way, if a storm comes along and freezes the outer layer, the butterflies on the inside will be safe. They will be protected. So it's definitely a way to protect themselves over the winters. There have been some really bad winter storms that have killed lots of butterflies, but for the most part, this evolutionary tool works. So again, the Midwest is really important because this is traditionally where all the milkweed was growing throughout the United States. So we still get 38% of our monarchs from the Midwest. Again, this year is going to be anomalous. This is not going to be true for this year. But this is what it's like in most years. This is what it looks like when we have a summer butterfly compared to a migration butterfly. You would think that maybe I just took 2 butterflies and sat them next to each other in my fingers and pulled the one wings up so they were more erect. But this is actually what the two different types of butterflies look like. The migration butterflies are about 20% bigger, 10 to 20% bigger, because they have farther to fly. Genetically, they're no different than the other butterflies from what they have found out, but they are a little bit bigger because they have a lot longer trip to fly. So they fly from here to Mexico, it's about 2,500 miles. So this is the population chart that Monarch Watch puts out. The organization that takes the observations all summer long, all spring long, and all fall long is called Journey North. So you can join Journey North at any point, and you can record your monarch observations all summer long. But this is a special count that happens down in Mexico over the winter. It takes several months for them to be able to come up with this. And what they have to do is the World Wildlife Federation, the Mexican government, and other organizations go down there and they march around the mountains, and they, I think they do like geotagging of where they see the butterflies, like the outer part of the population of the butterflies, and they try and track how many hectares or how many acres the butterflies are occupying. So you can see that in on the bar graph here, the third one from the left is 1996 to 1997. That was the highest population of butterflies that these organizations ever recorded. 1993 is when Monarch Watch was started, correct? 93, Carol? I think it was 93. 93, they started doing these counts down there, and so 94, they got their first results. But in 96 and 97, this 18.9 hectares, that is equivalent to, they think, to about 1 billion butterflies. And this population has probably rocked and rolled throughout history because of weather, based on weather. But you can see that it's been on the decline since then. Does anybody know what happened in 1996? Nobody? If anybody online knows what happened in 1996 that would affect this, put it in the chat. What happened in 1996 was that the first Roundup Ready corn and soybeans were released onto the market, which allowed farmers to be able to spray Roundup on their crops to kill weeds, and one of those weeds was milkweed. A lot of weeds have gained resistance to Roundup since then, and so the Roundup Ready crops are probably going to be on their way out in the next decade because of it. And hopefully they have learned their lesson, but we'll see. That's as much about that as I'm going to say. But the fact is that milkweed has never gained a resistance to Roundup, so milkweed has been decimated by this. But there are other reasons why the monarchs have declined. Weather patterns, suburban sprawl, the use of neonicotinoids is a really, really big factor in the decline of all insects. And so if you ever have the chance to tell someone to stop using a neonicotinoid, please do. You have my blessing. So the population has ebbed and flowed over the past 30 years because of this. You can see the 1819 was 6.05 hectares. That's the year that I was there. 2013-14, that winter was the lowest recorded numbers of monarchs in the history of our recording. And this year in 23-24, this was the second lowest. This was 0.9 hectares. So we didn't even reach 1 hectare this year. And 1 hectare is roughly equal to 2 acres. The year that I was down in Mexico, when we were on our way home, they had announced on the news that they found a new colony of butterflies on one of the volcanoes that surrounds Mexico City. So that was an incredible thing. So monarch butterflies are still out there. And the fact is that even though their population has fallen, monarch butterflies are not in danger of going extinct, but the migration is. We may lose the migration. The more and more smaller and smaller this population gets, the harder and harder it's going to be to get to Canada, which is their goal every year. Monarch butterflies, however, are not going to go extinct because monarch butterflies are in the Caribbean. They're found in Puerto Rico, all of the Caribbean. They are on New Zealand. They are in Australia. They are, I think, on the Samoa Islands, if I'm not mistaken. And They're in Central America. So there's pretty big populations down there. However, our population is the only population that has this massive migration every year. And that's what makes it so special. So that's why we need to plant lots and lots of habitat and milkweed especially. So let's talk about milkweed, monarch gardening and butterfly gardening in general. So you can create a butterfly garden in 6 pretty easy steps. First of all, you have to have a sunny location because all of the plants that butterflies and monarchs especially like are full sun plants. You need shelter from the wind. You need to be able to have someplace where the butterflies can safely shelter for storms and from wind and things like that. So having evergreens somewhere near your garden, it doesn't have to be in your garden, somewhere in the neighborhood nearby your house. Large, thick shrubs, thick vines, big clematis and things like that. All very useful for shelter. Next, you have to have the larval plants for the caterpillars. And for monarchs, we know that's milkweed. And for dill and parsley, fennel, all those kind of plants, golden alexanders, that's black swallowtails. Poplar trees, willows, elms, hackberries, and many, many other trees are for many, many other butterflies. The butterfly in this photo is a tiger swallowtail, and this year I was gifted a couple of caterpillars of tiger swallowtail, and so I had poplar trees out in the park that I live by, and so I went out there and got tulip poplar leaves and fed those 2 caterpillars, and so I had 2 chrysalids, and 1 hatched, and 1 will hatch next year. So I'm not sure why that is. I mean, I know that they saved themselves for next year, but why I had 1 of each, I don't know. The next thing you want to do for a butterfly garden is to add nectar plants to feed the adult butterflies. And so just a very, very short list of this would be blazing star, coneflowers, goldenrod, butterfly bush, zinnias, asters are really important. We're going to talk about this a little bit more extensively in a minute. The 5th step would be puddling. You want to provide a place somewhere in your garden for a puddle, just a little mud puddle for the butterflies to come down and sip a little bit of water. The male butterflies especially need this because they need to intake different kinds of salts and minerals that makes them healthy for mating. It's a little bit like butterfly Viagra. And then number 6, avoid pesticides. If for some reason you are still using some kind of insect killer in your garden at this point in your life, you really need to ask yourself why. What is so offensive about whatever that insect is doing that you need to go out there and kill it? At this point in our history as humans, we really need to start making friends with insects and stop killing them just for being there. Even Japanese beetles. I mean, if they're decimating things, there's things that you can do organically to control Japanese beetles. But if you're using any kind of pesticides to spray on your plants to kill an insect, you need to really think twice about why you're doing it and what is the offense that this insect is doing that is so terrible. You know, if you have tomato plants and you have a tomato hornworm, put a trap plant in a pot and let the tomato hornworm eat that plant. And then let it create itself into a hawk moth. They're really beautiful and they're important in the environment. So avoiding pesticides is really, really important. If you have to use the principles of IPM, that's integrated pest management, you can look up those steps on your own. That's not our focus tonight. But really, truly, butterflies won't feed on flowers that have been sprayed, and there is no reason why I would ever spray anything on my milkweed. Milkweed will give life to 40 different species of insects, and they all have a right to live, especially the monarchs, but all the other 39 species also have a right to live too. So you have to start changing your perception and your attitude towards insects, and I had to do the same thing. And it was a really enlightening process that I had to go through where I realized that the garden was not for these. It wasn't for my eyes and my enjoyment. My garden is for them, and it's to feed them. To feed butterflies, to feed bees, to feed beetles, even flies. Flies are some of my best pollinators in my garden, and they're there because I have aphids. But for all the insects, and it wasn't until I slowed down and I started going out and spending time in the garden checking for eggs for the monarchs so that I could bring in some eggs and raise them, that I really like sat my butt down in my garden and for, half an hour at a time, 20 minutes at a time, and just observed all the other insects that were in my garden. And I had never sprayed pesticides before in my garden, ever, but it wasn't until I started putting native plants in my garden that I started seeing this big wide variety of bees and beetles and all other kinds of things. I've even had staghorn beetles in my garden, which are very rare, especially in Northwest Indiana. So there's your 6 steps. It's pretty easy, but now we need to make a habitat in our garden. That's a different animal in itself. This is a picture of my garden from about 10 years ago. My garden's pretty messy. It looks like a cottage garden, but to me, it looks like a really inviting garden to insects, and that's what it's supposed to be. My neighbors don't hassle me. Common milkweed is not outlawed in my town. I have signs in my garden that say it's planted for conservation and it's a Monarch way station and Wild Ones registered garden. I think my garden's registered in like 7 places. And I can prove that I'm growing for conservation, so no one's ever hassled me about the garden. Pretty much my neighbors just think that I'm the crazy plant lady, especially now that my driveway is completely covered in plants for sale. But I had heard that somebody in some other garden club or group or something had this impression that my plants were all free. And the person who was talking to them completely shut that person down because that person lived in my neighborhood. Oh, I think she's giving them all away for free. No, that is her career. She is a plant grower. Do not go and take her plants. So yeah, that was an interesting revelation. But most important in an insect garden, a butterfly garden, whatever you're growing for, is diversity. The more diverse plant collection that you can get in there, the better your insects are, because it will create more and more depth to your ecosystem. You will start getting the teeniest and tiniest of bees. You will start getting teeny, teeny, tiny ladybugs. You'll start getting big fat wasps that are totally benign. The big fat black ones are my favorite. They're beautiful wasps. They kind of have a blue sheen to them. They're very pretty. They're very docile. But they're good pollinators. So plant with diversity in mind. This is really, really important. So don't get stuck on just like 5 or 6 plants and start planting just those over and over again. Okay, let's move on. So soft landings is a new concept that has come into fruition in the past few years by couple of different authors. I think this is copyrighted from Heather Holm. If you're really interested in native bees, Heather Holm is a fascinating writer that you should look up. But the idea of soft landings is that you take your trees in your yard and you remove the grass, you plant native plants under there, all the way to the drip line, not just a 3-ring little 3-foot ring. This is the entire drip line of your tree. Even if your tree is 20 feet wide, your whole drip line is going to be native plants. Low plants, you can use sedges, you can use little wild geraniums, you can use Virginia bluebells, and all other different kinds of native plants that are real low that can grow under a tree. And you plant them and you leave them alone. It's a huge concept for us here in suburbia, isn't it? We're so conditioned that we need to clean up in the fall, and we need to clean up in the spring, and we need to get rid of the leaves. But every time we get rid of a load of leaves in our yard, you know what is going with that load of leaves? Cocoons for insects, for butterflies, for moths. They're all going because they're wrapped up in those leaves. So the concept is to plant the natives, to leave the leaves, put the leaves on your garden in the fall, not all the leaves in your yard, but some. Cover that garden up, save those insects. And in the spring, here's a thing that's going to blow your mind. You leave it alone. Maybe you fluff up the leaves a little bit, but that's it. You don't remove a darn thing from there. You don't cut anything down, and you don't remove anything. It's a hard concept to accept, but in the town that I live next to, I just did a consulting meeting yesterday with the head of Public Works, and we're going to do a 100-foot long, 30-foot wide strip around 5 trees where they have a pipeline and they can't plant anything else. And they want to kind of get rid of the lawn in certain places in town. And so we're going to plant an enormous soft landing under these trees for the future when these trees get bigger. And it's going to be all native grasses and some native forbs, but mostly native grasses. And native grasses are really important for native butterflies, just as much as things like milkweed and golden alexanders and other plants for the caterpillars. Grasses are equally as important for other small butterflies like satyrs and skippers. So this is soft landings. You can look up this infographic. If you look up soft landings and Heather Holm, it'll come right up. And you guys can read the details on that. It's really fascinating. I think it's a really fascinating piece of work. And I'm expanding one of my gardens that will pretty much end up being a soft landing because it's under a tree. So, but then it's getting expanded, so it'll be even better. So some more ideas about making a habitat in your garden. I think I have a note in here. No. Okay, so plant butterfly plants in containers. You can definitely do that, especially nectar plants. I have huge steel containers at my house that are 8 feet long and 4 feet wide. These huge big steel bins, they're 31 inches tall, and they're filled with zinnias, and they're filled with verbena and all kinds of other nectar plants. So instead of doing all these individual pots of annuals all around my yard, I have put them all into 2 different places, and I see hummingbirds in there every day and different kinds of butterflies every day and lots of different species of bees every day. Oh, hello. Let's see, keep bird feeding stations and bird baths a little bit away from your butterfly gardens. On really hot days like we had 2 weeks ago where it was up over the 90s, if you spray the hot pavement on a sunny day, you'll see butterflies coming down and sipping that water, using it as a puddler. Let's see, other things you can do in your garden, place large rocks in sunny areas where that sun is going to catch the morning sun, because butterflies do like to sit on a rock and warm up for the morning. They can't fly until their bodies are about 85 degrees, and sometimes they want to sit somewhere where the sun is hitting them, where they won't be bothered by other creatures. And a nice rock in a sunny area is a good way to do that. Don't be too tidy with your garden in the fall or the spring, even your regular garden. Unless you have a very manicured landscape, your garden should be pretty much left alone, because you are not only going to have butterfly caterpillars down in the refuse and the leaves, but you will have baby bees in the stems of your native plants. And if you remove those, you are removing the baby bees. Make a drinking station with some fruit. And I only suggest to do this if you have a patio and you're going to sit out in the patio every day for an hour or two. Get those butterflies used to having that sipping station out there, and then take it in every night, because if you have raccoons or possums in your neighborhood, this might not be an option. But there are a lot of butterflies that really prefer rotting fruit to nectar. They get all their carbohydrates through the rotting fruit. And then you can also make a puddling station. If you don't have an area to make a little muddy area in your garden, you can do it with a big terracotta tray. I don't suggest using plastic. It should be a natural material like terracotta, and just fill it with some pebbles and a little bit of water, just a tiny little bit of water. And then you add a little sea salt in there, because that gives the butterflies the minerals that they need. Get to know your native butterflies, because they will have their favorite plants, like monarchs and common milkweed are really, really good friends. There's a lot of other butterflies that have special plants that they like. Of course, right now I can't think of any. And then limit your wasp habitat. You may want to, if your goal is to have caterpillars in your garden, you may want to limit your yellow jacket population. Yellow jackets can be very destructive to caterpillars because wasps will eat meat. They collect caterpillars and drag them down into their nests for their larvae to eat. So you can limit your yellow jacket habitat with putting out a wasp deterrent device like this. What does that look like to you? It is not. It looks like a bald-faced hornet nest, not a hot air balloon. I mean, it is a hot air balloon shape, but it looks like a bald-faced hornet nest to a yellow jacket. And when a yellow jacket queen sees that, she's going to say, oh, I don't want to get eaten by a bald-faced hornet, so I'm going to leave and I'll go find my nest. I'll make my nest somewhere else. And then the bald-faced hornets will not make a nest in the same place as a deterrent device like this because they think there's already a nest here. So it's a pretty clever way to do it. Monarch way stations are another great way to get information and to validate your garden to your neighbors. You can register your Monarch way station with an organization called monarchwatch.org, and it's not very expensive to do it. And there's a lot of other places where you can register your garden where it's free, but Monarch Watch uses the money for research, so it is important to support them. So what you need for your Monarch way station is food in the form of something for the caterpillars. You need nectar for the butterflies. There's a whole list of these plants in the application. You can check off what you have and what you don't have. You can plant later. Shelter, so trees and shrubs protect monarchs at night. And you need to have some kind of water. So you need to provide a little moist area, a bee, a puddler like that you make, or a puddle in the garden, or you can have a bee water out, some sort of water source. It's very important. There are, as of July 31st, 48,346 Monarch way stations in the US. And actually, it said on Monarch Watch today that that's a worldwide number. So for some reason, there's Monarch way stations in other countries. Like Australia and New Zealand makes sense, but I don't know about Europe. I think there's only been one monarch butterfly seen in Ireland in about the past 70 years, and that was a few years ago when it got blown off course. Let's see, what more can I say about Monarch way stations? There's a lot in Illinois, and there are a lot in Texas, and there is an informal competition between Illinois and Texas. And right now, Texas is ahead. So I suggest if you guys don't have Monarch way station, you might want to help the cause and register your garden soon. Where I live, the town where I run a Monarch Fest, we're trying to get at least 50 out of this town of 20,000 people to get registered in the next year or so. So we're working on it. I think we're up to about 15 now, so we're working on it. We've gone from like 3 to 15, so that's pretty good. And then when I got my Monarch way station, that was in 2011, and I was number 4,552. So I was under 5,000, and they had already been promoting this for almost 10 years. But then in 2014, when the application for the monarch butterfly to go on the endangered species list was submitted to the government, the monarch craze started, and monarch way stations were popping everywhere, and they are still growing every day. So it's a really good way for Monarch Watch and other researchers to know where the milkweed is in every state and every county. If you become a Monarch way station, they're never going to contact you. They're never going to come and look at your garden. This is all an honor program. Gardens never roll off the list. Gardens do get destroyed, but gardens don't roll off the list. So it's a historic thing also. So if you're interested, just look up monarchwatch.org. And how do we get more milkweed? We get more milkweed by collecting the pods at the end of the year and processing that seed and handing that seed out, and getting the plants to other people. And this is kind of how my little plant nursery started, was because people were desperate to have milkweed, and there was nowhere to get milkweed in the area other than like going out to Possibility Place. But at that point, up until last year, Possibility Place was not open to the public. So unless you were going to order a flat of like 38 or 72 plants, and no homeowner needed that, you couldn't get it. So that's why I started my little business, and a lot of my business is milkweed, although this year, oh my God, the aphids were just brutal this year. So let's talk a little bit about butterfly plants. I think those were a lot of good strategies for habitat that are easy to attain, and it's easy to have a butterfly garden, it really is. So for butterfly plants to put in your garden, we're going to use a really abbreviated list because we're going to run long tonight. You need host and nectar plants. That's important. So host plants for caterpillars, nectar plants for the butterflies. The butterflies are the adults of the organism's life cycle. Butterflies need to cling to flowers. They want a strong landing pad. They don't want to land on a flower and then pitch right into the mouth of a praying mantis. So it should be nice, big, strong, stiff stems. Butterfly flowers fall into 3 categories. They love daisies, all kinds of different daisies. They love spiky plants and tubular plants. So things like blazing star and salvias sometimes will have a butterfly on them. Clusters of small flowers like this yarrow are very important nectar sources. And small clusters of flowers like this, well, clusters of small flowers like this, I should say, like yarrow and other things like parsley and, I don't know, there's like a dozen other plants that have tiny little flowers like this. They have a lot of pollen in them, and they're really important to the life cycle of native bees. So keep that in the back of your mind. Color preferences for monarch butterflies especially, purple flowers, yellow, pink, white, and orange in that order. I don't know who did the research on this, but it seems to work in my garden. Okay. And then you want to start looking into keystone plants. So if you've ever heard of Doug Tallamy is a college professor, and he has been researching the relationship between native plants, the number of species of caterpillars that they support, and the number of species of native birds that those caterpillars support. The more native trees we have, the more caterpillars we have, the more native birds we have. If you have moved into a new subdivision in the past 20 years and you say to yourself, I have not heard a robin, a cardinal, a wren, or a sparrow in the past 5 years, it could be that the trees in your neighborhood are lacking. They're either not native, or they're too small, or there are not enough. So there could be 3 reasons for that. So the way keystone plants come into this is that the United States is divided up into these huge regions called ecoregions. We are ecoregion 8, if you want to look up plants on this list. Keystone plants are plants in this that support more life than any other life than any other plant on the list. Let's say that. So things like oaks. Oaks are the number 1. Oaks support, last count, was like 540 to 550 different kinds of caterpillars. That's 1 species. So that's oak species across the whole continental US and North America in general. And so that's 500 species. That's incredible. That really is incredible. And then when you get down to the other plants on the keystone plant list for ecoregion 8, you come up with things like native cherry and black cherry and plums and oaks and willows, and there's a couple of more woody plants. But then when we get down to the garden plants, the forbs, we have number 1, asters. If you have a garden and you are calling it a bee or a butterfly garden in any way, shape, or form, and you do not have these plants on here, then you could be attracting more insects. I'm not going to say that you have done wrong, or you're doing it wrong, or you've chosen wrong. I'm going to say if you add these keystone plants into your butterfly garden or bee garden, you will be doing better. You will be supplying food for many, many more species than you could ever imagine. So the aster species, false sunflower, which is helianthus, not heliopsis. You don't want heliopsis in your garden. So helianthus, the false sunflower family. Goldenrod, there's a lot of different varieties of goldenrod I'm going to go over tonight that are good for your garden, that don't spread. Coreopsis, there's many Coreopsis on the keystone species list, and then of course our woody plants under there. So the combination of these 4 plants for our garden that are keystone species, the average is 60 to 500 species that they will support. Okay. Okay. This is a little flyer about keystone species. So we saw the flyer for soft landings. This is the backside. So if you look up soft landings, this is the backside of that, and you guys can read more about keystone species and their importance. Goldenrod and asters especially are very, very important in our gardens. So let's talk about goldenrod. So the goldenrod that we see on the side of the road is either Canadian goldenrod or tall goldenrod, very, very spready. I believe every single seed is fertile on those plants. It's insane how fast they can spread in an area. They spread by roots also. You can tell if you have tall or Canadian goldenrod in your garden. If you pull it up by its roots and its roots are pink, it's a goldenrod. I don't know if all the goldenrods have pink roots, but I believe they all have a little bit of pink in them. So some really good ones that are fantastic for our suburban gardens that don't spread a whole lot are showy, stiff goldenrod, zigzag goldenrod for the shade, blue stem for the shade, white goldenrod I believe is for shade. And then the only other one that I have experience with, I don't have experience with the three on the bottom, but I have found a variety that I'm going to start growing in my own garden and to sell called Old Field Goldenrod, which is only 2 feet tall. So a lot of the argument that people have with goldenrod is that it's like way too big for their home garden, especially if they live in a situation like me where my lot is only 48 by 100. That's a small lot. That's almost a city lot. And so having really, really big plants can be a struggle for someone who has a lot as small as mine. So something like Old Field Goldenrod that's very short, it's only 2 feet tall, is going to be a good solution. So that one, it's not really in the trade anywhere. You can find seeds for it, but I do sell it this year for the first time. But showy and stiff are really nice ones for garden. They just make a big colony. They don't spread all over the place like tall or the Canadian. And then zigzag, blue stemmed, and white for the shade are good. So sometimes it's hard to find flowering plants for the shade. So let's talk a little bit about milkweed. I've got 4 of the best milkweeds right here for our home gardens. There are a couple of other ones, but they're just a little bit more tricky to grow. But first and foremost, there's butterfly weed. If you have a hot, sunny place anywhere in your garden, you should have some butterfly weed there because it is the monarch butterflies, one of their favorite nectar plants. They absolutely love butterfly weed. And so do hummingbirds and about 100 other bees and butterflies. Everybody loves to nectar off this plant. Now it is a milkweed and it does have the white sap in it, but the white sap does not have as much of the cardenaloid chemical in it to make the caterpillars poisonous. So you rarely find caterpillars on butterfly weed unless butterfly weed is the only milkweed that you have. I have a woman that I know that has been raising caterpillars off of butterfly weed for years because it's the only one that she has in her yard. It was kind of interesting when she started telling me about that a few years ago. Common milkweed is down in the bottom right-hand corner. This is the milkweed that we all are familiar with on the roadside and out in the country and in different places where it's allowed to grow. It's very big, it's very coarse. From a design aspect, it's difficult to have in a landscape or a garden. But if you have a large garden and you can handle it meandering around the garden and going from place to place from year to year, then it's probably one of the best plants to have for monarchs. Alternatively, you can plant prairie milkweed, which is only about 4 feet tall instead of 5 to 6. Prairie milkweed has the fragrant flowers just like common milkweed, and it also feeds caterpillars just as well. And for some reason, I don't usually find aphids on my prairie milkweed, but I'm not going to say that that's going to be a consistent thing because someone else might have it in their yard and get aphids. And then the other one that I wanted to focus on tonight was swamp milkweed, which is Asclepias incarnata. This is swamp milkweed, and if you're buying milkweed from a garden center or a nursery, some nurseries like Midwest Ground Covers are starting to call this rose milkweed instead of swamp milkweed. So that way people aren't pigeonholing it into only one type of garden, like a rain garden or on the side of a pond or something like this. This plant benefits from being in moist soil. It does not have to be in moist soil, but it can't really be in sand either. So it needs some moisture. It's kind of happier with a little bit of moisture, but it's very adaptable. I'm surprised at how well it does in some of my dry spaces in my garden. The must-have plant list for every butterfly garden, I would say number 1 is asters. It can be New England asters, it can be Short's aster, aromatic aster, any kind of aster that you really want, but you have to have some kind of aster that's blooming at the end of the season. Echinacea, which is down on the bottom left-hand side, Purple coneflower. Echinacea also comes in other flavors like pale coneflower, which is Echinacea pallida, and angustifolia. But Echinacea purpurea seems to be the favorite of the butterflies. Lantana is a good annual for the butterflies. Mexican sunflower down here on the right. Looks like a very innocuous looking little orange daisy, right? This is an annual flower that grows into a bush that is 5 feet tall and 4 feet wide. And it does that in one season. And when it starts blooming at the end of July, it will continue to grow bigger. And it will be blooming from the ground to the tip top of that plant all the way through to the beginning of November if the weather is consistent enough. It's a really, really tough plant. The bottom branches, when they get really heavy with flowers and side branches, they can break, but that's not a reason not to grow this plant. I would say that almost everybody who is trying to attract monarchs should probably try Tithonia at some time, the Mexican sunflower sometime. Bumblebees really appreciate this plant a lot, and so do hummingbirds. And then another annual that I really like for the monarch butterflies are zinnia. When you're planting zinnia, it should be a really think of open-faced turkey sandwich, not turkey sandwich in a roll, okay? So we want to have the fewest petals possible so that the middle of the plant where the stamens and pestils are available to the pollinators. And that goes the same for all other plants too. Anything with double, triple, special petals, more petals, furry petals, fluffy petals, those are not plants that are good for pollinators because the pollinators can't actually get to the nectar. And then up on the top, I have Verbena bonariensis, which is an annual verbena. However, I've kind of changed my tack on that plant. I really like that plant, and the monarch butterflies really love that plant, but there are 2 verbenas that are native to our area that we can grow. We can grow blue vervain and hoary vervain, and they are perennial, and they are a little bit better behaved than the Verbena bonariensis. Verbena bonariensis can seed a lot in your garden. One year I had a wall of verbena because it grew in the gutter of my garden, and I literally had a wall of hundreds of verbena one year. I wonder if I ever took a picture of that. So I would say instead of Verbena bonariensis, go for hoary vervain or blue vervain. Some other native flowers for monarchs, you guys can take a picture of this. So we have things like black-eyed Susan and gay feather or blazing star, bee balm, all different kinds of bee balm. It doesn't matter if it's a hybrid or if it is a native. Now at this time of the year, blue mist flowers blooming, and that is a favorite of all butterflies, especially monarchs. Anise hyssop, purple coneflower again. Penstemons are great. And then, that's not penstemon in that photo, is it? That looks like blue lobelia. Okay. Goldenrod at this time of the year is really important, and also asters. We do not grow cowpen daisy here in this area, so don't worry about that one. And scarlet sage is mostly for hummingbirds in this area. We grow it as an annual in this area, so it's not a perennial. But then New England aster and Joe Pyeweed are 2 big favorites of monarch butterflies. And the Joe Pyeweed just finished blooming in our area. A few more flowers for fall for monarchs. Again, New England aster and goldenrod down on the bottom, very important. Blue mist flower in the center. Joe Pyeweed is kind of done, so probably shouldn't be on this list. But this list could be for a little bit farther south of us. Anise hyssop indeed will grow all the way and bloom all the way through fall. Coneflowers can sometimes have a second flowering. Blazing star, you will want the northern blazing star or meadow blazing star because they bloom in the fall for the monarchs. Swamp milkweed is the Helianthus angustifolius. And then autumn joy sedum. Autumn joy sedum is on this list because it is pretty popular with butterflies, especially the painted ladies and American lady butterflies that migrate. For some reason, they are really attracted to mums and autumn joy sedum for some reason, neither of which are native here. Okay, wrapping up. This is a good slide to take a photo of if you can. This is some resources for you. Homegrown National Park, monarchwatch.org, SAG Moraine is a new organization in the area, Illinois Monarch Project. I forgot to put Schaumburg Monarch Initiative on here. But another one that you should write down that you can look up the website for is the Schaumburg Monarch Initiative. That's our organization that Carol and I are in. And then Journey North, if you want to do any reporting for the year. Usually people start reporting for Journey North in the spring when they see eggs and milkweed for the first time, and then all the way through fall, taking pictures of eggs and caterpillars and butterflies and reporting them. So what else you can do? Don't forget to register your garden for Monarch Way Station and get the sign up. If you think that you're in a neighborhood where people might harass you a little bit for having a native garden, especially in the front yard, and especially if you're thinking about rewilding your front yard, definitely get some signage out there, start talking to your neighbors, make sure that your city will allow it. Don't get yourself into trouble. There was a really, really big lawsuit in Chicago not too many years ago about someone who had done a wild garden in their front yard, and it actually was not against any ordinance in the city to do that planting, but they got tickets for it and fined anyway, and it all had to go to court, and it all got settled in court. Certify your garden with the National Wildlife Association. We just finished doing a big push of this in Northwest Indiana. So Northwest Indiana is a regional wildlife, National Wildlife Association area. You can register your butterfly garden with Wild Ones once you become a member. Don't forget your Wild Ones is West Cook. That's your chapter out here. Register with Monarch Joint Venture. You can register your garden with the joint venture. And then get involved with these organizations, especially with the Schaumburg Monarch Initiative and with Wild Ones and other organizations. The Garden Club, the Schaumburg Community Garden Club is here. And they're all important organizations to join and support and go to their meetings and do projects with them. Get involved in your community, because I don't think we can all do this in a bubble. Like, if we want to not only improve the outcome for monarch butterflies, but also all other insects too, I think that we definitely have to do this as groups. We have to do it in a community situation, because you can't do it all yourself. And your town needs to know what you're doing a little bit. You know, your city councilman needs to know what you're doing so they can appreciate the importance of it and maybe do it on town land in some cases. And then this is the last thing I want to show you tonight, I think. Let's make sure. This is a really cool chart. I had to reproduce it because it was so hard to just copy it from where I found it. So how far can a pollinator fly to find food? This is really, really important when it comes down to how many gardens are in your neighborhood. So for a monarch butterfly, once they eclose out of their chrysalis, they can fly 11 to 150 miles. And that is a summer butterfly. Of course, the migration butterfly is going to fly several thousand miles. What we have down here is a bumblebee next, and that bumblebee is going to be able to fly about a mile away from where it's born, from its nest, for foraging. And then the next one is a leafcutter bee, and that bee can fly about 1,500 feet away from its nest and forage for food. Summer blue or summer azure butterfly can fly about 1,000 feet away from where it was born. And then the green mason bee, I think that's a bicolor green mason bee, can only fly about 500 feet away from where it is born. Now, if those butterflies and bees use up all the food in your garden, are there other gardens adjacent to your garden, your neighborhood, that can also feed these insects, where they can start a nest the next year in those yards? The more of those kinds of gardens, the pollinator gardens that we have in a neighborhood, the more the population of each insect can expand, thrive, and grow. That means that we have more birds in the end because there's more food for the birds. We have a better environment. Some of these little bees and little tiny wasps that we can barely even see are predators of things like aphids. So we need to make sure that we are supporting those kind of insects. So really think about the quality of your pollinator garden that you have at home. Think about and look in your neighborhood, how many other people in your neighborhood are also supporting pollinators? And how can you encourage more people in your neighborhood to actually grow more flowers? So when I moved into my into my neighborhood 27 years ago, I started a garden, but the only other garden in the neighborhood was my neighbor Dan down the street, who tore out his front yard 35 years ago and put down lava rock and started planting flowers. And he loves his garden. His garden's absolutely beautiful. There's just tons of flowers everywhere in his garden. But he, for the longest time, was the only flower garden in the whole neighborhood. And since I started selling plants, not that my neighbors buy plants from me, because I don't sell the plants that they want to grow, there are more and more annual flower gardens in the neighborhood. And then once people get sick of buying annuals, then they will seek out perennials. And so this was like the first year that I actually had people in the neighborhood coming to me looking for native plants and looking for perennial plants that will come back every year because they're kind of tired of paying for annuals every year. So really start talking to your neighbors, get to know your neighborhood, get to know your neighbors, explain to them what you're doing in your garden, ask them if they're growing anything, can you split something from your yard and share it with them? Just start making a conversation, because the more of a conversation that we can start within our neighborhood, then it can grow beyond our neighborhood. And the pollinators need every garden that they can get in between one native area to another native area. If it's complete desert in between, that means that bee that's trying to, fly a mile away, if they don't have food within that mile, they can't go beyond that mile. So it's really important for us to grow the pollinator gardens in the area. Are there any questions? Yes.
Wonderful. Oh, wait, sorry. I was going to just say I need to come to you. If you're on Zoom, you're also welcome to submit questions in the Q&A.
Not really a question, but I'm really surprised you didn't have bee balm on your list.
It was on there.
Oh, was it?
It was, yeah, it was. Yeah, and there's lots of varieties and lots of species of bee balm. There's 3 native or 4 native in this area, and then there's all the cultivars are okay.
Dolly, can I ask you a quick question? And I saw your hand up at the front there. What would you tell somebody who doesn't have an in-ground garden who wants to support monarchs if they live in an apartment or a condo and they have a balcony?
If you live in an apartment or a condo, if you have a balcony or a patio or something like that, you can grow swamp milkweed in pots over the winter. They will grow, if they're a big enough pot, they will live over the winter. They'll be fine.
What is the life expectancy of the butterfly from when it hatches to when it dies? And then what is the natural predator to a butterfly?
For monarch butterflies, summer butterflies live about 6 weeks, and that's pretty much the same for all butterflies. It's about 6 weeks. But a migration butterfly is going to live 9 to 10 months because they're going to migrate down to Mexico. That's a 2-month trip. It's a 2-month trip out of Mexico. So they're living about 8 to 9 months. And then the natural predator, pretty much in this area, one of our big natural predators to butterflies and to especially juvenile hummingbirds is going to be praying mantids. There's not a lot of other things that are going to eat adult monarch butterflies, but the caterpillars and the eggs are susceptible to like spiders and little wasps and ants and things like that in the garden. But praying mantids are, the big Chinese praying mantids, they're a really big problem. They can catch, if they can catch our fastest butterfly, which is a monarch, and our largest butterfly, which is an eastern tiger swallowtail, and juvenile hummingbirds, then they are a menace, and they are not native. So make your own decision in your own garden for that one.
How fast is a butterfly? I see your hand there. I'll come to you.
Monarch butterflies can fly about 20 miles an hour, and they're pretty much the fastest.
Hi. Actually, I have 2 questions. The aphids, I have a milkweed that gets covered in orange beads. Is that the aphids?
Yes.
And then the butterfly moth, is there a way to attract them? And is there a reason you would want them?
What kind of moth?
Is it called butterfly moth? The white ones? No, it's very color. I thought it was called the butterfly moth.
There are a few moths that are really colorful that do look like a butterfly because they're so colorful. Do you mean hummingbird moth? Do you mean
It's a hummingbird
Maybe hummingbird moth, yeah. Hummingbird moths have some very specific plants that they're attracted to. So I would say just look up clear-wing butterfly moth or hawk-wing butterfly moth.
So, I mean, my whole backyard is garden, so I have a pond and flowers. I have no grass in the back. And years ago I saw them, and I've not seen them since. I don't know if there's something different.
Yeah, you have to look up their host plant. They have different host plants. But I would say bee balm is one of the big ones that they'll want to be looking for in your garden. Yeah, that's a really important one.
All right, Dolly, I want to be respectful of your time because we have gone over learning all these amazing facts that
No
you've
problem.
shared with us. And I mean, there was a lot and things I didn't know. I texted someone in the middle and I was like, did you know that monarchs went to Mexico? Like I just assumed like winter came, they went away. So I just want to wrap with asking one question, just kind of relating to you and all the things you've done. So you've been studying and working with monarch butterflies and again, all other pollinators for 24 years. What is something about monarch butterflies that has changed the way you interact with the world or the way that you view the world?
I think that watching monarch butterflies has made me slow down while I'm outside. I'm one of those people, I have ADHD, let's face it. If you have that, you're always on the go. You can't concentrate on anything. Your brain can never slow down. And when I'm outside and if I see a monarch butterfly in the yard, which this year was kind of rare, let's face it, I was able just to sit back and just watch it and just let my brain slow down. And it has helped me that way. That's just watching nature helps people unwind in general.
Wonderful, Dolly, thank you so much. And thank you to everyone. Oh,
Say something. If you haven't been to Spring Valley to see the butterflies, they raise and release them at Spring Valley. They have 2 releases a day at 11 and 3. Last year, they raised 1,703 monarchs. 7,000 people came during the season to see them. So if you want to raise them, if you want information, there's people there that will give you advice. You can go anytime. They're working and they're very friendly, and we're really proud of that program.
Dolly, would you mind just repeating that for our friends on Zoom because you have the mic?
Sure. I mentioned before also, Spring Valley Nature Center in Schaumburg has 2 monarch butterfly releases every day at 11 and 3. And there are volunteers there all day long that are working with the caterpillars and raising them to release them there at the Nature Center. And you can go in there anytime you want and ask them for advice on how to raise monarchs.
7 days a week or Monday through Friday?
I think it's Monday through Friday, correct?
No, it's
7 days? 7 days.
But the volunteers aren't there all day. They're in 2-hour shifts morning and 2-hour shifts afternoon.
2-hour shifts in the morning and the afternoon, so you have plenty of time to go see them.
But there's usually somebody there. Ask for Ned, he lives there.
And Ned's a good guy.
Wonderful. Well, Dolly, thank you so much. And thank you to everyone who joined us in
Thanks for having
person
me.
and everyone virtually. We are looking forward to seeing you all at